Today, we often think of technology as digital and mechanical solutions. However, technology also includes the living systems that have sustained life on Earth for 3.8 billion years. What can brands learn from these natural technologies? We would like to welcome our two keynote presenters, Jenny Anderson, CEO of Really Regenerative CIC, an organization which supports other organizations in the transition to a regenerative economy, and Mila Aliana, a chief weaver for the Planet Positive 2030, an initiative of Institute of Electric and Electronic Engineering Standards, recommending strong, sustainable design and goals for the year 2030. To all participants, kindly submit your questions on Slido. Please scan the QR code on the screen or key in 1372504. That's 1372504 at slido.com. We are taking questions throughout the presentation, and questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Please welcome Jenny and Mila.
So salamat pagi. Terima kasih kerana menjemput kami. And in case I didn't get that right, I want to thank Acacia Blue and Chamini for inviting us both to join you here today. It's my first visit to Kuala Lumpur and to Malaysia, and I'm very luckily staying for a further 10 days after the conference to explore your beautiful country. So I'm really looking forward to that. But today, Mila and I are here to start you off in a way by looking at technology from a slightly different perspective than everybody else may share with you today, which is from the perspective of the living systems technology that has sustained and continues to sustain life on Earth and has done so for 3.8 billion years. I'm going to invite my colleague Mila first to share with you some of the embodied technologies that living systems can offer to us as a human system. Mila.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much to Sharmini and all of the organizing team to invite us here. Looking forward to connecting with you all. Without further ado, I will start our presentation. And just a gentle reminder, if you have questions, please go to the code or the QR code to ask any questions during our 1-hour presentation. So let's start with evolution and regeneration of life before we go into the actual regeneration itself. Who knows here, well, not know, but what is regeneration to you? So if you could submit a response of one word, it would be a word cloud, but just what is regeneration to you? What does it mean to you? I'd love to collect everyone's input here before we start. Just give you about 30 seconds, and then I'll ask Honey and the operating team there to share your responses. Really excited to know what here in Malaysia regeneration means. Here we go. Jenny, would you?
Okay, fantastic. So renewal, reborn, rebirth. Reusing waste, a very practical way of looking at regeneration, restoring, regrowth, self-sustaining, recreation, a second chance. That would be fantastic. To recover and rejuvenate, not just our natural systems, but also human culture, and a way perhaps of revisiting the way in which we have thought about our economic design. Being able to continue a cycle that can be reused, something new, feedback systems, innovation, life, something that is continual, something that can renew and regrow, something that is positive, new life, fantastic.
There seems to be a multitude of definitions here, but it seems to revolve around repurposing, renewal, restoration. So let's start. Before I define regeneration from my definition, I'd rather invite you to experience regeneration. So I'm going to take you through this little deep time walk. What is evolution and regeneration life through an experience? A small experience. So let me just go back, because I clicked too fast. So I think about 13 billion years ago, the universe showed up. And within 9 billion years later, Earth showed up. This is starting to go through the evolution now. If we use 24-hour clock for the rest of the 48 billion until today, you will see at 3 a.m. the cooling of the Earth. Water comes up, the continents come up. Then at around the same time, 3.8 billion, the single-cell organism starts to show up. There will be the first dawn of life. This is starting to regenerate and evolve. About 2 billion years later, about nearly 2 billion years later, that's when oxygen came out of the sea, and this is why we are able to be alive here on the planet today. Another 2 billion years later, that's when the diversity of life came about as we are experiencing it today, both on the sea and the land. However, as you can see, about nearly 500,000 years, well, actually 500 million years, extinction came about. Literally around the corner, because that was already at 9 p.m. And that was 5 extinction, from literally 75% to 95% of all species, including, at the time we weren't born yet, they all died. And it regenerated, renewed, repurposed. That's how Earth evolves all the time. And you may ask, when did humans come around? Well, the humans came around about under a second of midnight. That was 2 million years ago, and 2 million years ago, that's when all kinds of humans, homos, came in. And another 200, 300,000 years, almost close to midnight, that's when Homo sapiens showed up in Africa, and that's all of us. We are the remaining Homo sapiens on this planet. So that was an experience for you to understand our function in this regenerative space of Earth and the evolution of Earth. So let's see about us humans. How does that connect to technology? So the evolution of humans and impact, as I said, that was about 2 million to 200,000 years ago. We are the only species left of humans, the Homo sapiens, and we introduced the rise of agriculture, the invention of wheels. That's the first time when technology actually started, and it went exponential. Now, between 2,200,000 to 10,000 years ago, we were hunter-gatherers. Now, what we see right now as technology is also analog. It started with agriculture and wheel. So that's how it started. Technology has been exponential. It's grown like a hockey stick within 10,000 years due to our creativity. However, as you see on the last map, this is a map that is a collaboration between Columbia University, some wild conservation organization, and the NASA. Is basically the human footprint on Earth. Since how we have basically not aligned ourselves to how actually the Earth and life actually regenerates. And this is where we are. As you can see, there's only a few green spaces left, And they're mostly in the Amazon, in Africa, and also, I think, the Arctic Sea. So as you can see, this was in 2018. They're still waiting to come with more data, and we are in 2024. I'm pretty sure those green are now less and less. So saying this, I'd like to come to the technology part. Now we understand our human evolution, life evolution, and how technology got here. Actually, I'd like to invite about 10 people up here. I know there's 2 people that said that they were going to come up just to demonstrate how technology has evolved in such a rapid way in the last 10,000 years. And I will put back the slide before. But is there about 10 people that would like to come up stage? It'll only be 2 minutes. So I'm going to ask the lady at the very front to come to the very bottom here. Right. So you will see, sorry. This is when writing happened, about 6,500 years ago.
So we're going to stand you here. Fabulous. Thank you so much. So you're writing.
So writing, and over here, 10,000 years ago, was agriculture. Oops. So then immediately after 500 years, pretty close, this is when the fire, smoke signals. So the whole focus here is how do we communicate long distance from one to each other. So this is part of technology, and this is part of the analog when we started, right? So there's many, many different, so I gave an example as how we communicate. So smoke signals. So what came later, almost 1,000 years ago, which is like 5,000 years, is our postal system. So here. And immediately after, no, not really. This is the carrier pigeon, sorry, the carrier pigeon. And then the postal system, pretty close. Right? So you can already see the jump. There were various technology, but this is pretty much the main technology, how we communicate one from the other. So this is the wired area, this is the visual. So you could also use drums, you could use flags. Here there was telegraph, there was Morse code, there was also the telephone. Oh no, that's the postal system. Am I behind?
Pay attention.
All right, so yes, no, this is all the visual. And now we're going into the wired era. So that's over here, very far. You're allowed about nearly 300 years or so. So you're the telegraph and Morse code. Very close is very close telephone. So Samuel Morse, Alexander Bell. So these are all the wired, all the first telegraph cable that was sent between America and Europe. This is all around this era around 18th, 19th century. So now we're going into satellite communication, right? In 1960s, even further away, right? About nearly 100 years or so. So satellite communication, we have internet, which is not far, 1960s, and you probably will be mobile phone and virtual call.
Asabi.
So just have a look. This is how technology became exponential. And as it got further down, this is where AI is starting. This is where, and drones, even in communication, TV, broadcasting, part of communication, but this is more about interactive. Now you can use these kind of headset and speak to another, which is being tested through AI, communicating with each other, and you can have holographs in your room. So just to give you, this is what regeneration means. This is the evolution of communicating. But what stands timeless throughout this is the function. of what the problem was. How do I communicate to another person at long distance? What changes is the technology depending on the context. Some cannot still be used in today, depending on the context. If you're in the middle of the desert, you won't have internet. So you might want to use the pigeons. You might want to use the smoke signals. So this is thing that sometimes in technology, we tend to focus on the technology itself without understanding what is its function. The function is going to be timeless over many, many decades, even beyond our lifetime. However, the technology, if you got stuck with the telegraph today, you can still use it, but it won't be contextually efficient for you. So this is what I'd like to leave you with, to consider as Jenny, Mike, thank you so much, first of all, for everyone.
Thank you very
I hope
much.
that was helpful. It's an embodied way for you to see how technology actually works and what its function and how you actually use technology in day-to-day life, especially for problem solving. It's not the technology that you need to focus on, it's the function, because the technology will change depending on the context, the time, and the need. And on that note, thank you so much. I'll talk more about the role of technology and AI at the end. I will now be passing this to my colleague,
Thank
Jenny.
you, Mila. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for stepping up to that very able demonstration. Okay, let's see if I can master the clicker now. So I'd like to take you on a little journey through some of the core 8 technologies that living systems for 3.8 billion years have used to ensure the continuance of life on Earth, and have a think about what that context might be for our current times in terms of the polycrisis that we are in the middle of, and what it might imply for brands and how brands might want to think about that. So first, I'd really like to remind us of the context that we are all in. You can see in front of you the Stockholm Resilience Centre's measurement of our planetary boundaries. Our planetary boundaries are the systems, the life support systems that sustain life on Earth. And in a very short space of time, since they first began measuring them in 2009 to most recently, we had overshot 3 or 4 in 2009, and we are now up to overshoot on 9 of our planetary systems. That means that for us, our life support systems are under threat. And this is the ecological crisis that we are all having to try to grasp and to deal with. And what is important about that is that everything that we should think about first stems from addressing these issues. Everything that we do should be focused on working towards reversing this cycle in order to guarantee that the conditions conducive to life will continue. But it's not just an ecological crisis. We have 2 other concurrent crises that are converging with our ecological crisis and that are intimately interlinked with each other. We have a cultural crisis and we have an economic crisis too. Our cultural crisis, certainly in the United Kingdom and in Europe, I'm invited here from the UK, and in the USA, we have a complete crisis of meaning, where so many people no longer connect to or understand or feel any deep sense of purpose, either in their work or in their life. And that is accompanied by the economic crisis that perhaps for many of us in this room, we really first started to understand in 2008 when the financial crisis hit, that our globalized, neoliberal-based economic design might not, in fact, be as robust and sustainable as we thought it was. that was further accelerated and made clear to us during the global pandemic that began in 2020 and carried on through 2021. Though you weathered it a lot better than we did and were much more prepared for that pandemic, it still brought the global economy as we know it to a standstill. So these are the multiple crises, the polycrisis that we are considering and thinking about and should always be focused on. My organization, Really Regenerative, our mission is to heal the story of separation that we perceive manifests in many different ways around the world. It manifests differently, but the story is the same, and that is a story of separation between humans and nature, which has resulted in the ecological crisis where we have taken our life support systems for granted and have continued to extract from them, whether that is extracting from water aquifers for agriculture all over the world, to the extent that you may have seen recently in a World Economic Forum video, the world is now tilting on its axis because not only does magma destabilize the world's tilt, but the extraction of water from aquifers is now tilting the Earth slightly to potentially 8 degrees of difference. And the story of separation between humans and humans, which manifests in so many different ways, whether it is through racism, whether it is through nationalism. It is a story that keeps us apart and keeps us from collaborating and working together to work on the global polycrisis. And also the story of separation between our analytical and our intuitive selves. We have come to rely so much on science and technology that it may be possible that we have lost sight of some of our more different ways of knowing and our intuitive ways of connecting to what is needed. You heard some of the speakers talk earlier about precision technology for agriculture. Many farmers that we work with have a deep, automatic, inbred sense of the well-being of their land. Of course, precision technology can help them address the challenges that they face, but we also need to be able to listen to people, whether they are indigenous people or farmers, people that work with our life support systems, because they have an intimate and embodied connection with that. And the way in which we work at Really Regenerative is to work place by place by place. For 25 years of my life, I ran a brand agency out of London and worked with global brands. I now work from a place-based perspective, because that is how living systems have sustained themselves on Earth for 3.8 billion years. Life works in bioregions and ecosystems and biomes to create multiple different diverse places that are full of life that creates one whole living planet. And therefore, there is something in that we should be thinking about in the way in which we design our economic systems and revive our cultural systems. One of the things that globalization drives is standardization and the depletion of culture everywhere. So one of the things that we work on in the different places that we work, whether it's bioregionally, with a city, or even with a small village or province, is to reintegrate economy, ecology, and culture. So I'd just like to ask you, in terms of living systems technology, and please do shout out, what do you see in these two images? What do you actually see? Anybody? What do you see on the edges of this amazing moth, which is the world's largest moth? Snakes. You see snakes. Fantastic. What do you actually see on the wings of this particular butterfly? Owl. You see an owl. Okay. So what this is demonstrating for us, what the technology here is in nature that we see, is deeply recognizing the nested and interconnected interrelationships that life has, because for neither of these beautiful moths and butterflies is the predator a snake or an owl. What evolution and the technology of nature has done here has understood that the predator of this moth is in fact a small rodent, and the rodent's predator is a snake. So the technology has allowed this moth to adopt the imagery of a snake to deter the rodent from coming towards it. It's a deeply embedded, interconnected recognition of a systemic relationship and interdependency. Exactly the same is true for this moth. Its predator is not an owl, but another small rodent that is the predation for the particular owl that is represented on its wing. So what is the kind of technology that we need? What might this suggest to us about how we can deal with the polycrisis? I think there are 4 key technologies. Living systems technology that I'm about to talk a little bit more about. What we call deveiling technology, and you've just experienced a little bit of that with Mila, where we use demonstrative design to showcase a story and to allow ourselves to take in information at an embodied level differently. Relational technology that I have just demonstrated or shown there, how nature recognizes the interconnected relationships between systems, and patterning technology, which, if this is of interest to you, maybe Shamini will invite me back again to talk to you about another time. So let's look again at some of nature's amazing transformative technology. What does it suggest to us? Oh, okay. Here we have one of nature's most amazing pieces of technology. When this caterpillar enters a pupa, before it becomes the amazing butterfly that you see on the left, something activates within its body called imaginal cells. Imaginal cells completely transform the DNA of the caterpillar into the DNA of a butterfly. There is not a tiny vestige left of the original DNA of the caterpillar by the time the butterfly emerges. The DNA is entirely different. And despite all of our human technology with trying to clone sheep or work on things like Botox, not that I've ever had any, we have not matched this amazing transformative technology that is literally at our fingertips. So what does that suggest to us as brands? You heard Mila talk about how humans have evolved and how our relationship to technology is evolved. But in fact, for 99% of our time on Earth, we lived in harmony with living systems. And many of the world's indigenous peoples today still live in harmony with nature in that way, creating the conditions conducive to life. But in our technological age, it's highly unlikely that we are going to be able to return to that kind of way of life that we see where I've recently been meeting tribes in the Amazon, or the Maori people or the Aboriginal people in Australia and New Zealand. We have to find a way to get back to a relationship with living systems within a technological age. And one of the things I'd like to propose to you is that we humans have a really powerful role to play in the constant evolution in creating the conditions conducive to life on Earth. And therefore, everything that we design, all of the brands that we design, also have a role to play in that evolution and continuing to create the conditions conducive to life. So during the rest of my talk, there'll be some questions coming up behind me that are questions not for you to answer on Slido, but for you to stop and think about how you might rethink your brand's role and its relationship to the living systems and the human systems that it is part of. And since I actually can't see the way across the room, forgive me if I turn around and read. So if the role of humans is as catalyst for the continuance of life on Earth, what would your brand, which is a human construct, do differently in the world? Something to have a think about. Okay, let me talk a little bit more about the core principle of life being nested and relational, and that nestedness and relational is sourced from place, whether it's a bioregion, a city, a village, or even a field. Our most powerful role as humans is discovered, we believe, from focusing on place. So let's just take a look at what that might mean when I say place is nested and relational. So the way in which natural systems work on life is through multiple different bioregions that you can see over on the right here. But if we come down to the Indian subcontinent, South Asian forests, and Malaysia and Western Indonesia, we can see that in India, for example, there are 8 different types of natural ecosystem on the Indian subcontinent, and 3 different types of forest in Malaysia. They all have a deep and lasting relationship to each other. When they are whole and they are fertile and they are self-regenerating, each ecosystem is whole in itself, but has a deep relationship to the one next door. How should we think about that in terms of how we design our imprint on Earth? From a perspective of working with bioregions, the way in which we think about it at Really Regenerative is that we work on regenerating human economic systems, human cultural systems, and our life support systems from a place perspective, wrapped around with a regenerative innovation culture that is designed in place, which also is held within a deep commitment to the constant evolution of human thought. And we are at a point in our development where we are about to make a new leap. And every new leap that the human system has made has been driven by technology. And you will hear some people later on in the conference talk about the potential role of AI being that key critical piece of technology, just as the wheel was that Mila talked about some time ago. But I want to give you an idea of what this looks like in reality. So I would like us to take a little journey to Scotland. Can anyone put their hands up if they've ever been to Scotland? Okay, a few people. It rains in Scotland quite a lot, but it's not lovely warm rain like you have here. It's pretty cold. This is a part of Scotland called Fife. It's called the Kingdom of Fife because it once had its own king. And it's a very fertile part of Scotland. It's a deeply food-producing bioregion. It produces a lot of soft fruits. It produces an enormous amount of grain. It also has some other critical problems. That grain production is largely purchased by global brands for a number of different functions. But most 87% of the food that it produces, it realized post-pandemic, is exported. Sometimes the grain is exported across to Poland, where it's processed, loses a lot of its nutrient, and comes back to the UK to be baked into bread that tastes like paper and has no nutrient density in it. In this bioregion, there are critical human health issues, poor health issues that are largely driven by diet, by eating cheap, non-nutritious food, when this, in fact, is a place that produces highly nutritious, particularly from fishing, but also from grain, but exports it elsewhere. Or it goes into companies like Diageo or Quaker Oats, for example. So one of the things that we are working on in Fife is to consider, what does a resilient place-based food economy look like? There are, in the county of Fife, 3 private estates. that are working together to try to regrow heritage grains that are better for the soil, help to regenerate the soil, help to regenerate the biodiversity. They are much more sturdier than the wheat that is grown largely for commercial purposes. They're lower, they're much more resistant to the wind, but also to work with the communities in Scotland to bring back local flour mills. There's only one flour mill left in the entire region, which is owned by a global brand, Cars, that makes food biscuits, so that local people in Scotland can begin to make their own bread in community-owned mills that is high nutrient density and high quality as the foundation of a much better diet, but will be available to them at a much lower cost than it is currently in the supermarket. So one of the major brands that operates in this area in Fife is Quaker Oats, buys a lot of the oats from farmers. Many of the farmers there are now moving to regenerative agriculture production with the new kind of heritage grains. And brands like Quaker Oats are really keen to be able to rebrand their oats as regenerative oats, because that adds greater value to the brand and therefore shareholder profit. But not so keen to pay any more to the farmer who has invested an enormous amount in changing his land from high production to lower production. Every single brand, every brand that's represented in this room is nested somehow in place, sources something from places in the world, and often puts a lot back into the local economy through employment, through creating job creation, but essentially takes the basic living commodities and exports most of the value to shareholder wealth. What we work at Really Regenerative is to find a way to transfer some of that wealth back into the place that it is extracted from, so that it can create much more longevity of the ecology, of the economy, and revive salutogenic health across the human system as well as the living system. Here is another brand that is based, Diageo, is based in Scotland and is investing deeply in upgrading its plants. And you can imagine perhaps how unpopular it was. Sometimes regenerative practitioners get to ask unpopular questions. When I suggested to them that the grain that they purchase in this area mainly goes to manufacture vodka, well, potatoes go to vodka, and grain to whiskey. Whiskey is one of the proudest exports of Scotland. But sometimes we have to ask hard questions. If we want to regenerate the health of the biodiversity in this region and the health of the people, what would it look like to not put so much of the grain into a product called whiskey because it's a great export product? What would it look like for 3 generations, 30 years even, to deprioritize that kind of production in favor of recreating local ecosystemic health and human health and food at affordable prices? That's quite far from you. This is a story that is closer to home. I've just recently come back from Chantaburi in Thailand, where I have been working with a great group of people who've joined our online learning journey, which is called Power of Place. It's a learning journey in regenerative design that takes place over 9 months. And Chantaburi, if any of you know it, is an equally rich food-producing district in Thailand on the border of Laos. But, and I know you also here in Malaysia produce durian, a slightly smaller version of durian. But what is happening in the Chantaburi economy that has always been highly diverse in its production, once upon a time had a great gems industry, had rubber plantations, produces multiple different kinds of fruit, is because the economic power of durian production for the Chinese market is so strong, many farmers are switching to monocrop production of durian. And over the last 10 years, that has had an alarming impact on biodiversity in the region because this fruit, let me see some hands of people that like this fruit in the room. I have tried it. Okay, great. There are some. I have tried it, and I have to say, I couldn't quite manage it. But this fruit is vulnerable to grow. It's vulnerable to pesticides, pests, so it needs a lot of pesticide and it needs a lot of fertilizer to grow well. And biodiversity is really in the region quickly plummeting. It's also likely to make the economy vulnerable if ever the demand for this fruit suddenly declines. So the municipality, the tourism industry, and the farming sector have come together, and we've been trying to support them to look at the story of Canterbury, real deep historical story. And one of the things that we've understood is that the original people who migrated into the region 700 years ago, the Chong people, who created over time the Chantaboon community on the river in Canterbury, were really remarkable growers of pepper and cardamom and other spices and herbs. So what we're trying to look at is how can we, in partnership with the tourism sector and the municipality, support farmers to continue to multi-crop by reintroducing high-value new products into the economy, like returning to pepper and returning to cardamom, so that the economy is more diverse. These are herbs that can be grown with pretty much zero fertilizer in biodynamic farming, and that the tourism industry can come together and is now applying to be, whereas Canterbury itself already has UNESCO heritage status as a site, a UNESCO site of gastronomy, which would create a completely different type of tourism whilst regenerating agriculture and also stabilizing the future of the economy and diversifying it. Here, you will hear from Mark Buckley, I think, later in the conference. Here we were together when we launched Herbs and Hope last year with the community in Canterbury through an amazing dinner in which we discovered the lost recipes of the Chong people and started to reintroduce those into all of the tourism destinations and hotels across Canterbury. And it was just utterly delicious. Here's another brand that's trying to do that in a different way, a brand called Brambles, which is a Spanish brand. It produces pallets for transportation. And they are looking at, naturally, all of their pallets are wood, so they need sustainable forests. But instead of just working to ensure there's continual growth of trees to provide wood for their pallets, they are acquiring land on which their forests are grown and putting that back into the hands of communities, so they are putting wealth back into towards the local people. So that is one of the questions that, as brands, I think that we have to think about. What should the role of brands be in the kind of polycrisis that we are in at the moment? Our inherent role has been to create profit for shareholders, to add value to the potential and profitability of brands. But perhaps this is time for us to rethink that role and start to think of the role of brands for the foreseeable future until we stabilize this polycrisis as being one in which we return biodiversity, we return value, we return economic power into the places and the regions, so that brands start to think about completely different place-based strategies for the future. One of those that we are experimenting with on an island called Mallorca in the Mediterranean with a brand called Ecover is, could it produce in that place a form of washing up liquid that is based on the lemons of that region that is only sold in that region of Spain, so that we start to locate product design and production in place, for place, and keep the profitability in a particular region. These are really early days for this type of thinking with brands, but we have a sense that this is a way to go. So what is the new relationship your brand could have with place? How could your brand restore and regenerate community, culture, and economy for a fair, just economy in the places that you source? What could you do differently, even if it means rethinking profit? Okay, how am I doing on time? Over there. 15 minutes. Okay, we're okay. So I just want to talk a little bit more about what relationality means. Any of you who are scuba divers may recognize this beautiful clownfish. The clownfish has a symbiotic relationship with the anemone that you see it nestled in. The clownfish needs protection from its predators, and the anemone has particular stings on the end of its tentacles that attack the fish's particular predators. The clownfish secretes a particular fluid that protects it from the sting of the anemone. So it has a symbiotic relationship. What does the anemone need? It needs oxygenated water to get its food. The clownfish has an amazing particular waggle that oxygenates the water for the anemone. So they have a co-mutual relationship that ensures the life of both are sustained. We also know in nature that bees, for example, honeybees, have a particular technology that is just and fair and equitable between them that they use to communicate when choosing to find a new nest. The African wild dog that you see on the top right, they have a democratic decision-making technology amongst their pack when they need to make important decisions about where to go and hunt or where to stay and look for water. Meerkats also have a democratic technology in terms of their decision-making about where to site their homes that is likely to be the safest and most sustainable place for them. So what could we learn from that kind of technology? The Royal Danish Academy of Architecture in Denmark, I've been working with for the last 2 years in a city called Kalundborg. The city of Kalundborg is a particularly unique city in Denmark. It houses a wind farm, it houses an oil refinery, it also houses something called the Symbiosis, where these two brands, Novo Nordisk, that produces almost all of the insulin for Europe, and Novozymes, that produces all of the enzymes that brands like Unilever use. But it is curiously detached from the citizens of Kalundborg and from the municipality. And when we first go into a place, we run what is called a story of place, where we invite all of the different stakeholders in to talk about the historic story of a place on which we base the future design of the economy. And one of the things that was very apparent in Kalundborg was that there was a story of separation going on between industry and citizens, between citizens and municipalities. And then a new arrival was coming in, an entire education unit that was going to take the technology of the Symbiosis and create a new education campus. It would also be separated out into a different area of Kalundborg. So you can see probably from some of the pictures here that there was literally no social interaction between the citizens. It's a very pretty place, but it was completely devoid and dead of human life and culture, and also nature. And when we spoke to people in the city, they were surrounded by nature, but had zero relationship with it. So the question that we asked ourselves about the arrival of the brand, the Royal Danish Academy, is how could that be a catalyst for creating a greater sense of community between all of these separated parts of society, between the industrial symbiosis, between the municipality, and between the systems, and between nature. And eventually what we did is we called into effect what we call a field of energy by bringing multiple different citizens together who had from personal interest community initiatives where there were maybe one or two people together. And eventually we created something called the Phoenix Group, which was a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary group of people that would then represent the citizens, the industry, and the municipality in collaboration with the incoming education campus and system to think about how life could be enhanced and regenerated and recreated in the town of Kalundborg. So instead of building a big, shiny new campus, we looked for abandoned buildings that were underutilized and not used and brought the education system into those buildings. Instead of building new, shiny housing for the students, we housed them with the citizens of Kalundborg. We got together with the industrial symbiosis, and when they saw that there was potential for engagement with citizens, that was potential for engagement with the municipality, suddenly they came to the party and started to invest in creating seafront parks. We held a series of experiments with architects to explore, what it might look like to have nature return to the city, and put trees in mobile wheelie bins and move them around the city so that the citizens could experience what it would be like to have nature back in the barren city. And the symbiosis started to fund things like mobile saunas on the seafront, build cafes, just to bring society back into the town. So what are the gaps in right relationships in the places that you work that you could restore and regenerate? And what sense of wholeness could your brand play a part in renewing? I'm going to stop there. I have always got way more slides than there is possible in the time that I have. But I hope that has given you some sense of how we can think about the technology of living systems and apply it to human cultural and human economic systems in order to create more regenerative change and have a think about the different kinds of role that your brands could play in the future, even if that is at the sacrifice of some profit. Thank you. Mila, I'll hand back to you, but we might need to flip on a few slides.
That's okay. Before we go into our Q&A, if we have time, I'd like to ask all of you again, what role do you play? I mean, what role does AI play in your work or will play in your work? I'm assuming a lot of you are, this whole theme is all about technology and AI in sustainability and industry. I'd like to find out. So, Jenny, would you like to share? Would you be able to?
Okay, that's better. I think some of you are ahead of the game and already answered the questions because they popped up really quickly, so that's fantastic. Enhancing literature reviews for research, that's an interesting one. Summarizing information, definitely. Augmenting human creativity and curation. It's true that I think we have lost a degree of creativity in human culture. Landscape policy. Job posting, giving perspective but not being dependent on it, gives you an angle for you to navigate. Fantastic. Ooh, really fast. Detection on security for data. Assisting humans to give the best solution. Could be augmented intelligence. I can see a lot of you are in research, gathering data and reporting, leaving the effort to focus on strategy. Some really interesting responses here that you're hopeful of. A friend on screen. Maybe.
All right. Thank you so much. There's a vast of roles that AI play and technology in your work, and some of you are still at the very beginning. So let's just look on technology in terms of powering sustainable brand transformation. And as I spoke about technology earlier, it is a regenerative force as well as a degenerative force. So depending on how you use it, it can bring renewable energy. We talked about the sustainable agriculture and food production, waste reduction in circular economy type of methodologies. There's a lot of ecosystem restoration and conservation using drones, using AI and remote sensing. There's also education and awareness. However, for the degenerative force, there's the use of overconsumption of our natural resources. You saw the map earlier, the human footprint. Only 13% of all of our planet land is wild. It's the rest 87% is all impacted by human. So that is why it's called, this era is called the Anthropocene. So we need to be mindful in terms of using technology that actually activates overconsumption, resource depletion, as well as pollution and waste. And again, social inequality. It actually exacerbates, accelerates social inequality, the haves and the have-nots. And there are many, many unintended consequences, especially AI, as it's going through so exponentially. We need to understand what that looks like. So in powering sustainable transformation, what we're suggesting here is using that for data-driven decisions. Each one of these 3 items that I'm proposing has degenerative forces too. As much as it's regenerative, it can be degenerative. So the AI data-driven decisions, it's harnessing AI to gain deeper understanding on your supply chain, consumer behavior, and environmental impact. This is all enabled through AI and also in real time. So you can make sustainable and regenerative choices. In the efficiency and resource optimization, this is about leveraging AI-powered automation and predictive analytics to streamline your operations for optimization, to minimize waste and maximize resource utilization. On the innovative and sustainable products, this is basically helping on sustainable research on your material, on designing for circularity, eco-friendly materials, and basically all kind of life cycle assessment. Now, another part of this utilization could be for storytelling for change. This is about amplifying what you already have as a brand through AI personalized campaign, and also creating experiences and foster meaningful connections that are more personalized around your brand's sustainability commitment or brand promotion. The collaboration and empowerment, this is something that's quite new, which is actually leveraging AI to foster a culture of sustainability and regeneration. How do you go to doing that is basically AI can find the partners, the employees, and your customers that are aligned on so many levels of your values and support you in very impactful social and environmental initiatives. Finally, as I said before, technology is regenerative as well as degenerative. So there are ethical considerations that needs to be really, really thought of at the very beginning of any journey with technology initiatives, including AI. AI has many, many issues such as privacy, biasness, which we are called hallucinations. There's also the potential loss of jobs, and also encouraging innovation that's led by a function to support and enable human well-being, not the other way around where innovation is driven by technology because you can. So it's basically needs to come back to what are human values. And again, coming back to the whole environmental impact, this is now really scary on AI and technology, how much waste they use, and e-waste as well as water and accessing natural resources that is very minimal at this point. So I'm giving a few 5 different examples of companies worldwide that are using this. There's Patagonia, IKEA, Unilever, Allbirds, and Island Fisher. So they've been using different techniques. There are some that you may be that you recognize, but some actually have escalated to really refinement in how they design an end-to-end life cycle of their products and services. So thank you so much. We ask a call to action for everyone, which is very much come and embrace AI and technology, however mindful of ethical consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Do we
you,
have
Jenny and
a
Mila.
few moments to take any questions,
Yes,
or
we
shall
have.
we come back later?
Sorry, we have 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
If you would like to give it a go. Yeah.
You can answer the first one.
How successful have you been in getting stakeholders to think beyond their own agendas and converge on a common purpose in your place-based projects? Is that one for me?
Yeah.
I won't tell you it's easy. We are, in many ways, all of us live in a global culture of fear, even if we may not recognize it. And we fear scarcity, and we fear loss, and we fear change. And these can be powerful resistors to making the kind of shifts that we need. So had I actually got to the end of my presentation, which I didn't, I'd have talked a lot more about the importance inside our organizations of creating a developmental culture, of people developing the inner strength and the inner knowing and the inner ability to self-develop that enables us to work with all of those qualities that hold back our potential for change, whether that is fear, scarcity mindset, ego, a desire to hold on to power and influence. All of those things are barriers to creating the kind of change that we want. But one of the things that I think is really true of the human condition is if you can reconnect people to nature and to the rhythms of how life actually works. Most of us are all good people at heart. Nobody who ever creates a brand or an enterprise or a business sets out to create a deleterious impact on the planet and on other people. We're merely locked into a system and an economic design that pushes us in that direction. So one of the things that is most powerful when we bring multi-stakeholder groups together is finding that common purpose that everybody can sign up to, which is sometimes a big enough idea that it feels challenging, that it feels a little bit scary, that really calls up the courageous spirit, but is something that is meaningful to the people that live in that place, that work in that place, and love that place. And is the connection to place that we have found, rather than working on a global scale, that really brings to life the desire to overcome those emotional constraints and the constraints of the neoliberal economic system that we've all designed and that we all participate in, that holds back the courage to try something that is really radically a different approach to business. That was a bit of a long answer, but that's my best one.
So much.
Okay.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.